Like our content? It's funded by viewers like you. Please consider becoming a sustaining supporter of New Church Live today.
So good morning, friends. Great to have you here. I'm Pastor Chuck Blair. A few quick public service announcements before we get going today. One is big apologies for last week. Last week we had our tech side crash, which is pretty rare, and we managed to actually broadcast on phone. I got a couple of sweet notes from people. I so apologize that it didn't look or sound that great, but it's wonderful that we were able to get something out there. So thank you for your patience with that, and we're all up and running again today. And that's important because we know the vast majority of our audience is all across the country, different places who live stream. And as well, we want to welcome those of you who join us here for our studio audience every Sunday morning as well. The second public announcement is a couple of fun events we have coming up in New Church Live. One is Susan and I will be hosting an open house. That will be on Tuesday, December 17th. Very fun. It's just a way to just get together with people, and we just show up. We'll supply the beverages. You can bring some food, and we just have a nice evening to connect with each other. More details on the website. More details on the website as well. Every year we also do a special Christmas Eve service. That will be at 5 p.m. on Christmas Eve. We do it at 5 p.m. so people have a chance to get a nice service in and then get out to dinner with people. It's a wonderful way, again, to just experience the Christmas season. And with that, we're going to go ahead and get started, friends. So today, as we start with Christmas, we're looking at this idea of hope and joy. That's going to be what we're really focused on this year. Because it reminds me of this beautiful line out of a Christmas carol, "A weary world rejoices." And I would imagine many of us are feeling like, oh, it's been a weary year. And we're kind of ready for something in terms of rejoicing. In terms of finding hope and joy in our lives, sharing that with everybody. And today we're going to be talking about that hope side of things and how that looks. And we're hoping to give everybody a sense coming out of here of things we can do in terms of actually thinking how hope might work, like mechanically. And that includes people who are here, people who are watching us. Maybe you've just had the best day and you're in a new relationship or you're in some kind of new connection and life is just humming along. That's a great place to understand hope. And an equally great place to understand hope is if you're coming here or you're watching online and you've got a lot of struggles and life isn't working so well. And how can you might be, and this is the title of today's service, how might you allow yourself to be surprised by hope? Knowing that life will have its circumstances, life will be on life's terms, and how do we even find ourselves with hope in those moments that are darker than what we certainly might like? So to get at that, I want to talk for a minute here about this basic dichotomy, and it's the dichotomy between the facts and the story. And this is such human nature. I mean, the beautiful part of religion from a Christian New Church perspective is that it's not something way detached. It's actually something that we live and we breathe, like religion has to do with life, like deeply with life. And we can look at that through a religious lens to look at this idea of facts versus stories. Let's look at facts first. We all have the facts of our life. These are the events that happened. And we can list them, and every day is going to be filled with this mix. These wonderful events that happened, and these events that are a little more challenging that happen as well. The key, though, is to remember that the story is what we tell about the facts, but the story is not necessarily the facts. We've seen this, and we've commented a lot on this in New Church Live because I think it's very true. Two people can go through the exact same sort of circumstances, but have totally different stories about life. Totally different stories about how they see things. And this is the part that's very humbling. It's interesting to watch. Here's the facts, here's our story about the facts. And if we create stories a certain way, it actually comes back in this feedback loop that's sometimes not so good, that actually forms the facts. Our story determines what we notice. Our story determines what we notice. Yesterday, had a beautiful wedding down in Ocean City. Andrew and Samantha, if you're watching, so much fun yesterday. And we're talking a bit about like living heaven now. And what does that story look like in a marriage? What does it look like to really try to live heaven now, to have that story? And I guarantee that you live that story, all of a sudden the facts of life will start to look a little different, even though they may be exactly the same as somebody who's not living life that way, who thinks life is always against them and life is unfair and life is this and life is that. Today we're going to be looking at a couple of biblical characters who will help us to see that, and we're going to be looking at Zechariah and Joseph, which I'll fill you in on them in a little bit. But it comes down to this idea, friends, that if we have the facts of our life and the story, Christmas might be an invitation to see that and to allow ourselves to be surprised. Where might there be a new story? So much of Christmas, so many of the beautiful, beautiful parts of it deal with this idea of light. Just a small little piece of light, small little piece of hope, small little piece of joy. And that if we allow that and we can actually hold that, and we can hold that little bit, that somehow the world starts to change. Now, does that change the facts of life? Not necessarily. But it certainly just changed the story. And that's what we're hoping to do today, is for all of us to go out of here, maybe invited into a bigger story. That's not just us. It's not just my story as a person or your story as a person. It's going back to the story. What's the story that God's trying to whisper into your ear? Think about that. What's the story God's trying to whisper into your ear? And part of that comes back to this idea of Christmas and this beautiful welcoming. Jesus grows up to be a young man, and he offers these beautiful words. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus and asked, "Who then is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" Jesus called a little child to him and placed the child among them. And he said, "Truly I tell you, unless you change and become like little children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Therefore, whoever takes the lowly position of this child is the greatest in the kingdom. And whoever welcomes one such child in my name welcomes me." That's what, friends, so much of what God is asking us to do, that childlike state, that state of wonder, that state of amazement, that state that might actually be able to do this, might actually be able to be surprised by hope. So I want to welcome you. It's wonderful to have you here, whether you're watching us today, tomorrow, a year from now. Thank you for being part of our wonderful New Church Live audience. Welcome. Welcome to New Church Live.
I was following the eye, 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 was following the pack, all swallowed in the coats, with scarves of red tied round their throats, to keep their little heads from falling in the snow. And I turned round and there you go, and Michael, you would fall and turn the white snow red as strawberries in the summertime. I was following the pack, all swallowed in their coats, with scarves of red tied round their throats, to keep their little heads from falling in the snow. And I turned round and there you go, and Michael, you would fall and turn the white snow red as strawberries I was following the 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 I was following I was following the I was following I was following the pack, all swallowed in their coats, with scarves of red tied round their throats to keep their little heads from falling in the snow. And I turned round and there you go, and Michael, you would fall and turn the white snow red as strawberries in the summertime. I was following the I was following the I was following the I. Thanks.
Very much. That was beautiful. So friends, let's talk some about this idea of facts versus story, and let's put it into a context, into the biblical story. And the beautiful part from a Christian New Church perspective is that when we read Bible stories, it's not about then and there. It obviously has that happened then and that happened there part to it. It's really about here and now as well. Like, how can we live here and now, and what does it look like to live these different parts? And the stories we're going to be talking about are the story of Zechariah and the story of Joseph. Zechariah, who ends up being the father of John the Baptist, sort of the one who goes to prepare the way for Jesus, sort of his front man, so to speak. And then we have Joseph, who ends up raising Jesus, eventually gets married to Mary. And we're going to be taking a look at their stories. And it's interesting because the stories, the way Bible stories are put together, friends, is they're always put together with this very deliberate, like it's just this beautiful poetic craft when you look at how Bible stories link together. It really is like beautiful music, or a beautiful song, or a beautiful poem where it all kinds of weaves and interrelates to each other. And we have to remember that the Bible, these New Testament books, they were really part of an oral tradition. So they were designed to be stories. And as we always need to remember, a story isn't 100% factual because it happened. It's 100% factual because it happens over and over and over again. So these stories are true. And they're also true. They're both and. So join me as we take a look at the story of Zechariah and the story of Joseph. Now, for one of them, Zechariah, it had been way too long. For the other one, it had been way too short. Zechariah will be going into his story in a long time. This was an elderly gentleman, hadn't had a child. And then along comes this hope. This is where he's just surprised by this great hope. Again, had been too long. And then Joseph, who's about to get married, finds out Mary is pregnant by the Holy Spirit. And you can imagine that story changing. All of a sudden, like, he's surprised by a whole different kind of hope that he had never imagined. And he's asked to shift gears in terms of that hope. It had happened way too soon. Now, why might that be? Well, one idea might be, friends, just for us to hold, is that it's always in God's timing. And it's not in God's timing in terms of a scold, or in terms of, no, you don't deserve it yet, or you haven't earned it yet. It's none of that. It's just God's timing. God's timing will always end up being the right timing. But it doesn't necessarily feel that way to us at the time. And it may not feel that way to us in this life. It may be not till the next life that we really get to see how all the pieces fit together. But God's timing, the important way to remember is that God's timing is not our timing. Just as God was so clear about saying, my ways are not your ways. And as we get older, maybe much older, we actually come to a point, my ways are not your ways. When we hear God say that, we go, thank goodness. Thank goodness. Because I would have planned my life far differently, but there are beautiful parts that come out of it that are so unexpected. So that's the general facts with each. And then when we look at the story with each, like, both of them end up with a beautiful son, a beautiful child. And all the beauty that comes along with that. all the life-changing parts that come along with that. I love the idea, right, that when we think when a baby arrives that a baby is powerless. No, not true. Walk into a house with a young mom with her firstborn baby and just see how the house is rotating. What is the house rotating around? What is the house being organized around? What is the house totally committed to? But the child. So yes, in a sense, when that spiritual part, when that little light starts to shine, of course it sort of is powerless in a sense. But also, just like an infant, it's incredibly powerful as well at the same time. So let's take a look at the facts here with these two different men. First, let's take a look at Zechariah. So Zechariah, he was, sort of one of the people was at the top of the pyramid in ancient Israel. He was a member of the clergy. He would have been a Levite. He would have been at the very, very pinnacle. Now again, society at that time, it wasn't divided into upper class, middle class, lower class. You essentially had upper class and everyone else. And the upper class were the educated, elite, sometimes religious professionals. The Romans ruled over all of them. But he would have been this very well-respected, he would have been a rabbi, we might call him a rabbi today. He would have been somebody very highly esteemed. And he's married to this wonderful woman, Elizabeth. We'll be talking about Elizabeth and Mary next week. Listen, they'd been married for decades. They hadn't had a child. Now, in this day and age, lots of people don't have children. Some choose not to have children. But at this age, it wasn't just a child. A child was so much more than what we could imagine today. And it's not that I think people love children more. I don't think that's true at all. I think whether you're talking today or then, people just love their children. But there were all these other components of a child too. There was part of it that was having an heir. Having the idea of your line being passed on was really important in society at that time. And it also was your retirement plan. The job of that son was to take care of his parents. So if you didn't have that, you didn't have much of a future in your older years. And you didn't have this idea that your line was going to be passed on. And there was all kinds of spiritual thought around that as well. So what he had was his characteristics. If you look at his characteristics, he was skeptical and faithful. He gets told this news and he's like, wait, I'm way too old. How can this happen? And he wasn't asking, how can this happen? He was like, how can this? I'm way too old. This isn't going to take place. He couldn't believe it. Again, surprised by hope. An angel reassures him, yes, it's going to happen, and I know you don't believe it, so actually you're going to be mute until the baby is born. But he does end up being surprised by this hope. And that's a very different, it's a very different, not the surprise per se, but life circumstances very, very different than the story of Joseph. The story, sorry, I want to hop back here a minute. The story that he ends up being invited to, sorry, I forgot to go over this slide. The story he gets invited to, Zechariah, is this story. When the baby is born, this is the story. Those were the facts, this is the story. And you, my child, will be called a prophet of the Most High. Here he's talking about John the Baptist. For you will go on before the Lord to prepare a way for him, to give his people the knowledge of salvation through the forgiveness of their sins, because of the tender mercy of our God, by which the rising sun will come to us from heaven, to shine on those living in darkness and in the shadow of death, to guide our feet into the path of peace. And there's so many, friends, so many beautiful biblical references there that are going back into the Torah, that are pulling it forward, where Zechariah gets clear. All right, those are the facts. Here was this hope, unexpected hope. All of a sudden, this child is born to Elizabeth. And all of a sudden, he just has this huge epiphany of sorts, where he starts to see this idea that something really is being born in his life. Something has been born. And I love the reference in there to the 23rd Psalm. It's very subtle. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. He would have known that. He would have known that psalm deep in his bones. And for him to finally see that little piece of light. Again, surprised by hope. I think, friends, right, we can look at that and imagine all of us could tell a story about that. Something where we had waited and waited and waited and had really, in many ways, given up hope. And then here's this surprise, this divine surprise. And we see the world so differently on the other side of that. And then there's Joseph, and Joseph is such an interesting human being as well. Joseph, we're going to look at his story in some detail here, but Joseph, the facts of his story is that this was a young man. He's all excited because he's found the woman who he wants to marry. He's proposed, no doubt he's had conversations with the parents. They're all set to go. They're all ready to go. Those were the facts of his story. Very different again from a Zechariah. And he, no doubt, at that time, take yourself back to when you were like 18, 19, 20. What were you thinking about with your future? Specifically, if you have a partner and you fell in love at that time, what were all the hopes and dreams that you had moving forward? That's the space he's in. And see, this is part of this rediscovering hope, this being surprised by hope here, again, because sometimes we go into life with all those beautiful plans. And we're all ready to go. We're all teed up. And then that moment happens. That moment where it all turns upside down. We don't spend much time of that with the story of Joseph because we get right on to Mary and how he does and the beautiful way he handles it. But there had to have been some moments there just of pure despair. Because all his plans come crashing down. And like Zechariah, he's invited into a bigger story as well. So let's take a look at that story. We see with Joseph, he comes at it, and instead of like that skeptical bit, but faithful, he comes at life and he's very obedient and compassionate. Those beautiful qualities there. And we can see these qualities, these values, almost becoming this bridge to this story. Let's take a look at what his story was. This is how the birth of Jesus the Messiah came about. His mother Mary was pledged to be married to Joseph, but before they came together, she was found to be pregnant through the Holy Spirit. Because Joseph, her husband, was faithful to the law and yet did not want to expose her to public disgrace, he had a mind to divorce her quietly. There's the compassion right there. This beautiful part where he's obedient, and yet at the same time, we also see this deep compassion that he's not going to throw her out. But after he considered this, an angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream and said, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary as your wife. And that, do not be afraid. You can go through the Christmas story almost to do sermons on all the times that they say do not be afraid, because there are many. Because what is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins. All this took place to fulfill what the Lord had said through the prophet. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call his name Emmanuel, which means God with us. I want to just stop there for a minute. It's a little bit of an aside. But just, friends, keep on coming back that's what we're talking about here. When we're talking about Advent, when we're talking about Christmas, we're talking about God with us. Not out there, not over there, not at the end of some journey, but literally God with us. As in heaven, so upon the earth. That arrival of God, like literally into our lives, into their lives. When Joseph woke up, he did what the angel of the Lord had commanded him and took Mary home as his wife. But he did not consummate their marriage until she gave birth to a son, and he gave him the name Jesus. Such incredibly beautiful parts there, friends. And as the musicians come out here for our middle song, just think about the shifts that are taking place here. The way that these people had lives that were just so. And no doubt they had written stories about their lives. And here's the facts and here's the story. And then there's this beautiful, gentle, incredible, amazing part where, and this should just give you chills, where God is constantly like leaning in and whispering to them a new story. Not shaming them about the story that they had. Not telling them that the facts of their life aren't what the facts are. But this beautiful, incredible, incredible gift and leaning into something new. A new kind of hope and a new kind of joy. And when we come back, we're going to talk about maybe some specific ways that we can do that in our lives here today.
Did you know that your baby boy would one day walk on water? Mary, did you know that your baby boy would save our sons and daughters? Did you know that your baby boy has come to make you new? This child that you delivered will soon deliver you. Mary, did you know that your baby boy would give sight to a blind man? Mary, did you know that your baby boy would calm the storm with his hand? Did you know that your baby boy has walked where angels trod? When you kiss your little baby, you kiss the face of God. Mary, did you know? The blind will see, the deaf will hear, the dead will live again. The lame will leap, the dumb will speak, the presence of the Lamb. Mary, did you know that your baby boy was Lord of all creation? Mary, did you know that your baby boy would one day rule the nation? Did you know that your baby boy was heaven's perfect lamb? The sleeping child you're holding is the great I am. Did you know? Thank you.
Is that song beautiful or what? I mean, what just a gorgeous piece of music. Mary, did you know? And I think for all of us, right, you could put our name in there too. Like, we did you know? Did you know that there's this bigger story? Did you know that with a smile and with great joy and with great hope, God's inviting you into it? And that story, when we're invited into that story, it may not change any of the circumstances of our life, but it sure does change how we see it, how we hold it. Think how much time we spend, friends, being stuck. You know, stuck in a story that's a pretty crummy story. I mean, and I'm sure you can see it in yourself. I'm sure you can see it in other people too. When you have a friend or a loved one who's just stuck, they just need a new story because this story keeps on grinding them down and keeps on reaching back to find all the facts, quote unquote, that will tell them how unfair life is, how bad life is, how bad other people are. Christmas, we get invited every year to a bigger story. An amazing part, again, this is a paradox I can't fully articulate, but we're invited into this much bigger story with the arrival of this wee tiny baby. This little tiny infant. And we're to see in that infant Emmanuel, God with us. It's something to think about when we think about Joseph and we think about that angel. And I think about just the way his life must have turned. And we don't know whether it was weeks or within an hour. We're not sure the exact time frame here. Doesn't give us that in the Bible. But I'm sure there were moments of moments of absolute despair. And then an angel shows up and says, "Fear not," and whispers in his ear this much bigger story. What's the angel whispering to you? What's the whisper right now? Again, remember, hell shouts, heaven whispers. So what's that angel whisper for you? The story that God's trying to share with you about how to maybe see life differently. Because when we understand that, folks, we see hope in a different way. We start to see hope that's anchored in a deep trust. In a deep trust. Now does that mean that we always have 100% trust? No. God, there's nothing about that. God in no way is expecting us to always get it or always see it. I mean, the Bible, folks, is filled, like the Lord's Word is filled with stories of people who are just like you and I. They have good days and they have bad days. Sometimes they get it, sometimes they don't. That's part of the human condition. But there's this deep trust that we can keep on leaning into and working towards. Again, at the same time, keeping an ear open for the whispers. And sometimes those will come through other people. Sometimes they'll come directly from God. Sometimes they'll come through revelation. Sometimes they'll come through life experience. But keep your ear open. Keep the ear open and stay grounded in the trust. The ear open, grounded in the trust. Thinking this morning from a Swedenborgian perspective, like what are the real keys to doing life well? And there's such a list you could come up with. Some of the ones worthy of consideration, thinking about this morning. One is integrity, that idea of life woven together, taking the higher angels of our nature, living them out there into the world. That's important. Goodwill, super critical. Goodwill, like really coming into the life with goodwill, not with ill will. We're really going to, the best we can we're really going to look at other people with goodwill, especially those people who might not, quote unquote, deserve it. Another one might be curiosity. Curiosity, to remain curious about the world, open to the people in your lives, open to what God might be trying to teach you, open to the journey that is life, because salvation is not a one-stop shop. Salvation and healing is a beautiful lifelong process. And all of that gets held in this idea of service or usefulness. And I'd throw in there, that so much of this deep trust, and again, it's circular logic, I know, but this hope that's grounded in a deep trust, let's play it in reverse. It's a deep trust that's grounded in hope, that refuses to give up on hope. Because once you do give up on hope, where are we left? What can we do in the world if we're really, truly hopeless? And that's a bad story. There is such a thing as bad stories. That's a bad story. But imagine a whisper, hope into this deep trust, and this deep trust that's grounded in hope. A few weeks ago, talking with someone who's going through a serious medical challenge, and coming to the end of the conversation, and with serious medical challenges, prayer might help. It might, but it might not solve the problem. I mean, it helps, but it doesn't necessarily mean like the cancer goes away. But maybe part of this deep trust is this, friends. When we look at all these different parts of theology, all these beautiful things we can consider, we can anchor this hope. We can anchor this hope in this deep trust, and we can just say this: it's all going to be okay. It was interesting sharing that with this person, and could just see the tears welling up in their eyes, and I get that, because it is all going to be okay. You know that, right? It is all going to be okay. Now, we get to forget that, and we get to remember it, and Christmas helps us to remember it. It helps us to remember that hope again and again, and to remember that in life, and I love this phrase, we live in the already but not yet. I mean, I think that's so much of hope. We're living in this time, this part of our lives, where we're living in the already but not yet world. That's hope for me. We have this sense, this deep sense that it's already here. But we also know it hasn't fully arrived. And just look for those little parts of the world where you see that. A dear friend shared with me this great story about his neighborhood. And what they did is they decided they were going to take down all the political signs and have a block party, when the election was over. That's the already but not yet world. That's beautiful. And even look at something like that. Can you see the hope anchored in this deep trust? Can you see where that deep trust is? A deep trust that we can disagree at a certain level. And frankly, we should disagree at that level. There should be conversation, there should be debate, should be all those things. And there's a hope that pulls us back where we can step back into this place where this is this reminding of, oh yeah, this is all we shared. And this is all we do share. And this is all we will share. Let's celebrate here. Those parts, friends, are so much the idea of how divine providence works. Like this birth of Jesus was part of divine providence. It was part of this great movement of God and love, and you could use the two interchangeably there, this great movement of God and love through world history that will continue to pull us forward. And we can come back to this story again and again, and we need to come back to it again and again because it's constantly reminding of what we know, what we already know with a capital K, at our deepest levels. I mean, I think that's why, friends, for those of you who are local, there's a beautiful, what they call a tableau, which is a reenactment of the Christmas story over at the Bernathen Cathedral right across the street here from where we broadcast for New Church Live. And you go to that tableau and you go through and you see all these beautiful scenes, and then they have the final scene as you walk forward and you see a live infant there. That gets me every time. Because that's the truth. That's the hope. That's the deep trust. And every year it's kind of a surprise. So friends, wherever you are on your journey this year, final takeaway. Do a little Joseph action today. Listen to what the angels are trying to whisper in your ear. What's the hope they're trying to anchor you to? A hope that no doubt is all about a love that stretches into the future, a hope that is all about this deep trust. And whether you're living in a time of abundance or a time of darkness, doesn't matter. We can all use more and more of that in our lives, because that again becomes this little light that can grow. So friends, in closing, have a great week. Listen for the whisper. Live into the hope. Amen. What we're going to do now, friends, is we're going to land the service here with a little meditation, a little prayer, a little blessing. And then we'll close with the last song. So please join me. Lord, thank you for your presence here among us today. And Lord, help us as part of this story to understand this story not as detached from us, but as part of our story and part of the story. Lord, facts and stories, oftentimes two different things. And Lord, help us to come up, to craft, to write, to develop a better story. One grounded on you, one grounded on love, one that fully understands that the main way that we worship you is by loving other people. That simple and that hard. And Lord, help us this Christmas again and again to hear those echoes. Those echoes now literally thousands of years old, but forever new and forever true this Christmas season. Hear our prayer. Our Father, who art in the heavens, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, as in heaven, so upon the earth. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we also forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever. Amen. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you, bring you peace, and bring you home. Amen. Have a great week, friends.
Sleigh bells ring, are you listening? In the lane, snow is glistening, a beautiful sight. We're happy tonight, walking in a winter wonderland. Gone away is the bluebird, here to stay is a new bird. He sings a love song as we go along, walking in a winter wonderland. In the meadow we can build a snowman, then pretend that he's Parson Brown. He'll say, are you married? We'll say, no, man, but you can do the job when you're in town. Later on we'll conspire as we dream by the fire, to face unafraid the plans that we've made, walking in a winter wonderland. In the meadow we can build a snowman, then pretend that he's a circus clown. We'll have lots of fun with Mr. Snowman until the other kitties knock him down. Later on we'll conspire as we dream by the fire, to face unafraid the plans that we made, walking in a winter wonderland, walking in a winter wonderland, walking in a winter wonderland. Thank you so much. Have a great week.